Out of an abundance of caution.
So if we're ready to get started, I will begin by reading the conflict of interest statement. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every member of this publications board to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict. If any board member has any known conflict of interest or is concerned about the appearance of a conflict with respect to any matter to be discussed today, please advise us now. And assuming that nobody has anything to report, let's start off with Jennifer. If you could give us a brief summary of the fall of 2020 edition, okay, and then the pending articles.
All right. It looks like we've got a nice lineup for this edition, and actually a couple of other approved articles in the pipeline that I can use if we need them. And my first question is, with the Justice Isn't Always Blind article, there was a suggestion, I believe it was from Stephen, to include Colin's email message to our membership with that article. And I just wanted to get feedback. Since we have Colin on here, he can give his opinion, but from the rest of the board, your thoughts on including that message with that article as a sidebar.
Well, Colin, how do you feel about it? Are you good with that?
I guess I'm fine. I didn't know what the article "Justice Isn't Always Blind" is. That something I've seen, or
I don't know that I've been sending you our articles, but this is an article from Judge Parker Dunstan, and she put word out to the bar and asking for stories of examples of situations that Black lawyers have dealt with where they felt their race was an issue in a situation. And so it's just basically a bunch of short snippets of people telling, their experience, and then a brief comment from the Chief Justice, from some former remarks of hers. So that's really all that article is.
Okay. I mean, if it's helpful and you think it's appropriate, I'm fine with doing it. I just hadn't been following that, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
There was a nice article I got too. Joe Webster, who's a federal magistrate judge over in the Middle District, wrote an article a few years ago and published it, and was an interesting article along the same theme. I talked with him after some of these things came out, and he might be a source for us too, to do something, or maybe to dust off what he had done and look at whether to have some message given his position to federal judiciary. I just thought that might be at least worth thinking about.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I don't think this issue is going away anytime soon. It certainly wouldn't be for this edition, but I have a feeling that this is still going to be lingering, for months to come. So that might be something to look for our winter edition. So thanks for that. Okay. So
that, before you go on, that just brings up something that we've addressed in the past, and I don't know that we ever felt strongly one way or the other, but about having themed issues. I mean, I don't know how you all feel about it, but if you think it's worth discussing, we don't have to make a decision now, but we could consider having a themed issue, or a themed publication on this particular issue. Does anybody have any thoughts about that, one way or the other? Darren? Oh.
Well, we've got two articles essentially in this edition that are dealing with this, because Robin Morades also wrote her article about race, and but dealing more with the stress that the additional stress that Black lawyers feel, and it's a really good, powerful piece, and it's 3 or 4 pages long. So it's a substantial article. It is going to be your lap column, but it is also dealing with this topic. So we've got 2 now. If I talk to Joe and get another one, I don't know that we need to have 2 now and then a focused issue later.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I'm sorry. I interrupted you when you were going through your laundry list. So go ahead.
Fine. We just got to keep. All right. So is every consensus of the board is good to run that email as a sidebar?
I just want to say that I really appreciated that Colin sent that well thought through email, that it was forceful, that it was said what had to be said, and it did it from the perspective of the majority view, the majority, the white side of things. And you know, the snippets from the judge's article are striking. And I wish they didn't have to be anonymous, as I also said in my follow-up email. And I realize why some of them would have to be, but again, you know, why not be honest with one another and out front and really, you know, pull the Band-Aid off a little bit.
Well, anonymous. I sent Jennifer a article that showed up on the Lawyers Weekly email that they do, and it was similar to this article that was written, that was submitted. And in that article, they identified everybody who had something to say about a particular story, and including the author of this article that was submitted had a blurb of what her experience had been. So I think Jennifer was going to ask, I don't know where that went, but
Yeah,
I thought it'd be more powerful to have a name there.
She had promised the people who submitted anonymity, so she didn't feel comfortable then turning around and reaching out and asking them to disclose their names. And she also thought if they were going to disclose who the author was, then should they also disclose who the offender was? And so she said, let's just let it lie where it is.
Okay. So, Jennifer, so as far as the fall edition, are there any other articles that you want to highlight or discuss at this point?
No, I think everything else is good and was well received by the board.
Okay. And what about the other approved articles? Are those articles that are anticipated to come out in the following issue?
I think none of them is really timely. So I think we can sort of use them whenever, and when more timely pieces are submitted and approved, then we can certainly run those and then fill in as needed. We also have the sabbatical article. You all sent a lot of feedback about the second article that was submitted and wanting more information, not just why he takes the sabbatical, but how he goes about and does that. And he is working on that. And he emailed me yesterday and said that he should have that done maybe in the next week or so. And I kind of said, you know, don't worry about getting it done now. I don't know that I can get it in this edition anyway. And I don't know how many people are traveling at this point. So we could probably kick that can down the road just a little bit and be safe. So that should also be coming in soon.
All right. So as far as the articles that we've been talking about through the months that are in the works, the ones that I have were the one by Doyle Early, which actually came out in the last issue. We needed some filler, so we were fortunate enough to be able to put that one in the last issue. And then Peter, it says here that you spoke with Mac. Do you have any update on that? Are you here, Peter?
I'm here. I did not speak with Mac about that.
Okay.
So I will do that ASAP. But I think it will be it'll be interesting with the fact that there's no minor league season this year. Maybe there'll be some interesting tie into that So I'll talk with Mac for the next issue.
Okay. Darren, can you give us an update on yours?
Well, I've talked to Matt Davenport on a number of occasions, but, you know, he's interested, but he hasn't committed. Jay Van Oy, I think I reported the last time that his dad passed away, and since then Tom Speed died up in Boone,
Right.
and Jay is having to wind Tom's practice down, and I'm just not going to go back to him right now. You can just take that off the list.
Okay.
I talked to Kim Crouch, and I copied Jennifer. Kim Crouch has got a Wake Forest University professor who is going to write an article, who actually spoke at the NCAJ implicit bias seminar last year, and she's going to inquire, and I sent her the guidelines. So I would expect that Kim's at the beach right now, but maybe next week or the week after, she'll let us know if that professor has agreed to write that article. I don't think that she'll have any problems. And if Kim said that if she doesn't want to write it, she will find somebody else who will write it. So,
I mean, this is one of those topics that's obviously very timely. So,
well, I asked her, I gave her the deadline of September 15th. And as I mentioned, I copied Jennifer so that they have a
good,
portal to talk to Jennifer about extensions and stuff if they need it.
good.
Andrea, Steve has his hand up.
Andrea, I just wanted to suggest that John Willardson might be a source for a moonshiner story. He told me one once that was pretty funny.
Okay.
But if we've lost our moonshiner author, we could check with John. He's up there where there's plenty of old stills.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Jay Van Oy practices in Wilkesboro too. So John probably knows the same people that Jay's father knows. And so that probably would be a good avenue.
Well, I like the topic. So, Steve, are you willing to follow up with John and see if he has any angles on this?
Yeah, I would. Sure.
I just think it would be something that would be interesting and maybe fun too to read.
I agree.
Yeah.
Steve, what's John's last name so I can write it down?
Willardson. He's a
John.
bar counselor.
Oh,
Is
okay.
is he off the council or still with us? It's hard to tell.
He's
We don't
still
see
on.
him.
I think he's
Okay.
still with us.
Yeah.
Maybe the article will come with samples.
Yeah.
I do have a moonshine story that I'll tell you when we're not in the meeting one day. So.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it in moonshine, but anyway.
For the implicit bias and just a broader diversity inclusion topic, Monica Webb Shackelford is a Black lawyer in Raleigh. She has her own practice. She's a lawyer and a mediator, and she also does diversity and inclusion training. And so she might be another source for an article. You know, if Kim wants to take care of it for this time, but you're looking for another article in the future, we could ask Monica if she'd be interested.
Okay. You know, that just made me think about something on implicit bias. I don't know if there's somebody out there that could develop an article along these lines, but you have the bias that people of color and other minorities feel, but then you have someone like me who's, you know, white and don't, you know, that's the whole topic of the implicit bias, is that like, what are we doing, even though we don't think that we're biased, what are we doing that we're not conscious of? And I'm just wondering if there's somebody out there that is white that could write an article from that angle and how they feel about this whole dynamic, and you know, just getting a different perspective. But it would have to be somebody that is, you know, willing to be creative and come up with, you know, just an angle that would be interesting, and somebody that's a good writer that can really, you get that message across from our perspective.
And probably also who has done training in this. I mean,
Yeah.
rather than just a perspective of being white,
Right.
I think it needs to be framed in such a way that it is supported with training, like, like some of these other articles that we're talking about are.
Camille, are you thinking like maybe somebody who went through some training and their sort of aha moments that they picked up on going through it, saying, oh my God, I had no idea that when I said this, it was being perceived as that, or things of that nature? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think, just a different perspective and those feelings that we have. If, like, for example, I've witnessed it before in court and it's made me uncomfortable, but so that's just a different perspective. But Camille, maybe, do you think Monica might be somebody that would consider doing something like that if we asked her to look at it from that perspective?
Sure.
I practiced law with Monica for years before she went over to Campbell. She'd be a great person to do that if she would.
The other person that might be good, because of a conversation I had with him last night, is Eben Rawls. He's done a lot of this implicit bias and inclusion training, and he was telling me what kind of effect it's had on not only him personally and his beliefs and thoughts, but it affects his how he handles his jury trials and his cases. I think Eben's extremely articulate. I don't know what kind of writer he is, but I could sit and listen to him all day long. But I could always ask if he would be interested if you guys want something from that perspective. But he has an interesting perspective on it, not just personally, but business.
Right. Well, I think it's worth asking. And, as far as Monica goes, Camille, is that somebody that you're comfortable approaching, or do you want somebody?
No, I know Monica well. I'd be glad to. Another thing that might be interesting to do is an interview with both perspectives in one article. So you're talking to someone like Eben, and then you're talking to someone like Monica, and it's it might get to Steve's desire of and I'm not trying to put words in Steve's mouth, but Steve was talking about, these are hard conversations, and that might be one way to actually see it play out. What's a difficult conversation, as opposed to a lot of standalone pieces from separate perspectives.
Well, I also wondered if, as opposed to sort of standalone pieces, if we could have sort of one piece that has the perspective of several different contributors, all sort of identified. I mean, I think we've been through, our head employment lawyer put us through the implicit bias training, and it was eye-opening, I'm not going to lie, and well done. And then we also have a lady here that heads our diversity group that her perspective, and she's an Indian lady, believe it or not, from Toronto, Canada, and her perspective is so much different. And I wonder if we could put together sort of an amalgam of 3 or 4 different perspectives into one piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we might do that to kind of pull this together is, Camille, if you can talk to Monica and maybe brainstorm with her, and then Darren, you talk to Eben, brainstorm with him, and just see if they have some ideas on how we could approach it. And and Heidi, do you have access to somebody that you could talk to? And just, I mean, if we start with brainstorming and then we come back, maybe at the next meeting and see how we can pull it together, or if we want to do it by emails, like what ideas you have, we can try to get people started if we can kind of get focused. But we're probably thinking of only a few possibilities of how this could play out, whereas if you talk to people that are in the trenches, they might have some better ideas about how to just get that information out there in an interesting and important.
Well, it's a big deal in the employment you know, law area right now, really big deal. We are
Yeah.
getting a ton of calls on that sort of training and, you know, management of the issue.
This is Margaret. I think all of this is great, and I think it would. I'm with Jennifer. This issue isn't going away anytime soon, and if we continue and not having a themed edition, but continue addressing different aspects of the whole situation, that would be a good thing. And on this particular issue or topic or article, whatever comes with it, comes from this, to include the names of some courses that attorneys could either take or bring into their firms. So it's not only an article to read and learn, but resources you can turn to hire that sort of training yourself.
Yeah, and for those small practitioners that might not have the resources to hire somebody to come in, if there's some YouTube or TED Talk video that we could recommend, that would be helpful too. If that's possible to do without, I don't know, Jennifer, you'd have to make that call on whether we can do that publicly. Okay. Well, if you all could go back to those people and Heidi, your connections, and then maybe start off by sharing what you find out or thoughts that are shared with, with us by email, that would be great. And then we can start kind of developing it for the next meeting.
Well, and sort of along the same lines, but not implicit bias, but some of the hard conversations we're all having right now. And I recognize that this topic may be too politically charged, but I'm thinking about two really, really interesting conversations I had recently. One was with a guy who was a professor at the College of Charleston, and he studied extensively sort of the Confederate monuments background. And I realize that's a politically charged issue, but kind of thinking it was really eye-opening to me how much was there. And then, believe it or not, over the weekend, I spoke with a lady who was the publicist for NASCAR. And it was a fascinating conversation about the different perspectives, even on sort of the flags, the different flags that were flown. And, I'm not sure if there's a way to make it all neutral and objective, and I'm aware of that sensitivity, but I thought that both of these people were so interesting, and it was really a compelling conversation. And I didn't know if there would be any wiggle room there on an article, either along the lines of the monuments or the flags, or what the sports industry is doing, or something like that.
I like it. I
get the sensitivity. I do.
Yeah.
I promise. I can.
But what if the publicist for NASCAR could do something? I mean, it could write something. I would think that she would be possibly a good person, because she's trying to balance.
Oh, she is. Well,
and not make it political.
She was interested in what we had to say from an outsider's perspective of, here's what we see. And it was completely contrary to what she thought. And it was really interesting what they were doing and what they'd been trying to do and how we perceived it. And I don't know. I thought it was actually kind of cool.
Do you feel comfortable enough approaching her?
Yeah.
Then do it.
I don't
go
mind
for
asking.
it.
And
you never know, right?
You never do know. So
I always say encourage a submission, and we can always pass on it.
Right.
And as long as you are honest with the author and just say, if it's something that's too political, if it's not going to pass, it's not going to get past the board. And so be sensitive to that, and just know that we're interested, but there's always that possibility it won't get published. And then it's up to them if they want to put forth the effort or not.
Well, and sometimes you wonder, it's hard to explain to somebody that something factual, which is really what we were talking about. We talked about, here are the steps that NASCAR had been taking over the last 10 years, right? That factual can still be, in these days, politically charged. But I will talk to her because it was super cool.
Okay.
And I'm not a NASCAR girl. I mean, minus my fast car, that's not my thing. So food for
Okay.
thought.
On that
Great.
note too, I will send this to Jennifer, and maybe if you look at it, Jennifer, and see if you think we should send it out to the whole committee. Philip Gerard, the guy I'm trying to get to write an article, wrote another piece, an op-ed, and I'm not even sure where I got it, but I've got it and I can send it to Jennifer, talking about the 3 different kinds of or eras of Confederate statues, the ones that were contemporaneous with the Civil War, like gravestones or a memorial that was put up in memory of somebody or a group of people, but at the time, basically at the time. Then the ones that are more like historical markers, like at a battleground, that there are informational, XYZ occurred here on this date. And then the ones that are the most controversial are the ones that were put up, like Silent Sam, during more or less the Jim Crow era, that were put up, 40, 50, 60 years after the Civil War ended. And those are the ones that are being removed, I think, more often than the others. But he draws a distinction about the different eras of monuments. So I'll send that to Jennifer and y'all can take a look at that.
Okay, good, thanks.
And while
Can I
I'm
just,
about him, I circled back about his article on women's suffrage.
Mhm.
And he said in his last email, and I checked again this morning, and I hope I'll hear from him again, during COVID, he doesn't have access to a lot of the archives that he needs. So he's kind of on hold about that article, but I'll keep trying. And that I'll quit about Philip.
Okay.
Okay.
There was
I
somebody
could just
else.
add Andrea, if I could just add a quick comment. One of the things I think, because of the very charged nature of the topic, that we would be wise to keep in mind is just our, I guess, the Keller requirements from that U.S. Supreme Court case, that anything that we do with mandatory bar dues, which would be publishing a journal article, should be tied to the regulation of the profession. And I think there's a way to tie that. The thing that I'm thinking of right now is, I remember seeing an article on WRAL, was it sometime this week or last week, where they are either discussing or have made a decision on tearing down or taking down one of the statues at the Court of Appeals for a Chief Justice who was a former slave owner, and how that kind of, I don't know what other statues are around our different courthouses and all those conversations that come up. But I think just, as much as this is, I agree, I think this is a fascinating article. It'd be a fascinating issue to discuss, but just because of the politically charged nature, we could see a challenge on that. And so reminding ourselves to tie it to the regulation of the profession, I think, is a wise thing.
Right. So, I mean, because these articles have the potential of sounding political, which we don't want, I think they're interesting, and I would still want to welcome the opportunity to vet them. And if we just vet them with a very critical eye, make sure that everybody reads, them, not just do we like the article, but does this comply with, with what we need to, move as far as publication, just comply with whatever obligations we have as a bar journal using bar dues for this. I think we can overcome that. And if we don't feel comfortable about something, then we just won't publish it. So, but thanks for the reminder. And
Andrea,
yeah.
I just want to, a year ago, we were talking about the heroin and the OxyContin crisis.
Right.
And I'm not a runner, but if I were, I'd be more of a marathoner than a sprinter. And I think these issues are issues for a marathon. They need to be talked about over the course. I'm against having a single topic issue. because I've seen those single topic issues at NCAJ with their trial briefs, and they're just not interesting. You read 1 out of 8 issues.
Okay.
Although I think these issues are things that people would continue to read, but I bring that up because, you know, I think it's good to have these articles, but I think we need to be careful in stretching them over. I mean, this is going to be, I think we ought to make it an issue or a topic of conversation over the course of the next 4, 5, 6 years, and be careful at the number of articles we're putting in one issue, because, you know, now we're not even talking about the opioid crisis right now, and it's still there. It's still, you know, I see it in court every day. And I just want to bring that up. We need to be sort of sensitive to that, and not be, you know, just a sprinter. And then all of a sudden, a year from now, we're talking about another crisis, and race isn't an issue that we're talking about so much, even though it's still an issue. So I just want to bring that up.
No, that's a good point. And, you know, as we move through these topics, you know, let's hear some other areas that we can focus on too. I mean, does anybody have any new information on the opioid crisis? The only thing that I know is that some of them, the lawsuits that have been filed against defendants, the defendants have filed bankruptcy. And so that's stopping some of the litigation, but I don't know if anybody has any other angles on opioid.
That's the problem. It's not being talked about because other issues have just sort of covered them up. So
those companies are filing bankruptcy because the insurance policies that they all have, the suppliers, pharmaceutical companies, have an exclusion for opiates, so they don't have coverage. And the opioid use has just mushroomed during the pandemic.
Well, that's an angle, Gray, about how opioid use has increased during the pandemic.
Yeah, licit and illicit, just gone through the roof.
So is that something that Robin Morades might have information about, Jennifer? Do you know? No?
Possibly. I can check with her. She's out on medical leave right now, so I'm not quite sure when she's going to be back in, but I'm like Darren said, this is a marathon and not a sprint, and I think we'll be dealing with a pandemic for months to come too. So, I mean, we could be looking at winter or even the spring edition. So
I'm kind of shocked to hear Gray say that licit opioid use is going through the roof when you have these huge judgments against the Sackler family's business and the Sackler family themselves, and whether or not they have insurance, the many, many hundreds of billions of dollars they made is somehow being secreted from those that got the judgments. That would be an interesting follow-up story to me. I imagine it's something you could find in the mainstream press. I'm not sure what the angle is on North Carolina or North Carolina law, but there's no way that doctors should be freely dispensing opioids now.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Robin and see what she's hearing and who might be a good resource for a follow-up article on that.
Okay, good. Gray, first of all, thank you for writing your article on Rufus. I found it very interesting. I loved it, especially since he's from here.
Yeah, he's a man in full. There's no question about that. And I've got to go to a deposition, so I'll give you my report, but I'll have to leave in a few minutes.
Okay.
I did want to say that when Darren becomes a marathoner, I will sprout wings and fly. Tom Keith, I've kept Jennifer posted on this. Tom Keith has presented a historical article about the Klan Nazi trial. The problem is it's 50 pages long. And I was able to squeeze down to 1,000 words, everything up through jury selection, which made him furious. And so he's decided that he will condense the remainder of it. He rejects my editorial advice, which I know has come as a shock to you. But he has, I'll tell you, a spellbinding piece if we can ever get it condensed down to an article. And so it is still in the works. But I continue to press him, and we're halfway there now if I can get him to finish off the remainder of the article. With regard to the Supreme Court Learning Center, in the wake of the bicentennial, I have communicated directly with the president of the current president of the North Carolina Historical Society, who unfortunately is also my brother-in-law, and they agreed to take ownership of that project. And in the pandemic, he did absolutely nothing about it. So I'm going to have to continue to press for that. And I think the best way it's going to get traction is when there's enough time after the election, after the pandemic, when the Chief Justice herself and her colleagues on the Supreme Court can focus their interest on it as well. So that's, the whole for now. Hopefully we'll get that going at some point. There are 3 other states that have one. It'd be great to see North Carolina be number 4.
Ray, this is Margaret. Would it be possible, or do you think it would work to run that Klan trial article as a 2-part series or even 3-part series?
Well, I think that if he would simply condense it down, say, if we had it down to 2,500, 3,000 words, I think it would make a nice article. You have to remember the reason I wouldn't run it as a 3-part series is because of the nature of it. You had a bunch of rednecks who murdered a bunch of people and got away with it, basically. There was a civil suit in the wake of that, so they got great judgments against people who didn't have a dime. But I think one article would be appropriate if I could just get him to finish it. And the reason is all of those attorneys are dying. Bob Cahoon, people like that are instrumental in that, they're gone. And Tom Keith is not this spring chicken himself. So I want to get this finished. There are a couple others left, but there's nobody like Keith. He was really one of the masterminds in that entire trial.
Okay.
Even 5,000 to 6,000 words is completely fine. I mean, at the beginning of our fiction writing competition, I think the limit was 5,000 words. So we can certainly dedicate 5,000 plus to this topic, which I know is going to be fascinating. So don't feel pressure to get it down to 2,500.
Okay, I'll see what I can do with him.
All right. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Gray. Heidi, you're next. Any updates on Justice Wishart?
I'm striking out with all the judges who are seeing visions of retirement.
Okay.
I mean, I practically begged Judge Green because I'm like, you're reading the book. Why won't you review it? And I think he's just happily on his Harnett County farm and not interested. So I wish we could find someone to do a review of Judge Davis's book since he shot me down. Does anyone have any other suggestions for people?
No. Darren, have you read the book?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
It looks interesting though.
Yeah.
We can just kind of keep it at the forefront, and just if we run into somebody who we think might have read it or talked about it or whatever, just remember to ask, and
Right.
don't worry about it in the meantime.
I'll buy it and read it and see what and consider it. So
Okay.
if Grace's okay with that.
I think Brad Fowler's article on the e-filing, we're shooting for the December 15th deadline for the winter journal, right, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Sure, with all the budgetary constraints now falling upon the state and AOC, he's going to have a lot to say.
Okay. So, thanks, Heidi. Is there anything else that you have on your list? Okay.
No, that's all I have other than the ones that we talked about a little while ago.
All right. So Jennifer, the first thing that's in your section is the commencement speech ideas, but have you been working on that? I know that we have Chelsea Christ's article, and that was one of the things that we had talked about, right? And
Yeah, I finally did get her comments. I think, thank you, Camille.
yes, thank you, Camille.
Finally getting that done because my emails were completely going unanswered. I haven't worked on anything with the commencement speeches, but I have been following up with with Chris at the Supreme Court, and he is still working on that piece. I'm hoping we'll have that for the next deadline. So fingers crossed on that. And then cybersecurity, I think, is meeting this quarter. Peter?
Peter?
They're meeting today in conjunction with the PMBR committee.
Okay.
Are they still thinking about writing something and submitting it?
I believe so. Brian, are you on still at your computer? You were on the last call of that cybersecurity committee, and I do think they're still interested in doing something for the journal. You might have stepped away, but I believe that is still their intent.
Okay. All right. And that's all I've got.
Okay. So Margaret, you've already talked about the Phil Gerard article, and Peter, you already said that you have not had a chance to talk to Mac yet. With Tom's, I know Tom's not with us today, but this idea about interviewing attorney legislators, because I think elections are coming up, maybe we should just table that until after the elections.
I think this is Peter. I think that's a good idea because the legislature, Tom was justifiably waiting for them to get out of session, and then they really never did. They're probably out of session now, not officially until September, but you never know. Could come back, and then I think it would just be too close to an election time to have that.
Yeah. So Jennifer, let's just put that back on maybe at the beginning of next year.
Yeah. Fine.
And because I still think it's a worthwhile topic.
Yeah, Andre, I think it'd be a good tie-in maybe to like a legislative session preview article, which would come, the beginning of 2021 when they start their long session again.
Okay, great. Yeah, agreed. So Jennifer, one thing that's not on the agenda, but I wanted to ask you about, are you getting any submissions for the COVID contest? One?
One submission.
Was it good? We haven't read it. You don't have to answer that. But what do you think? It's just not going anywhere?
I actually thought about this yesterday, and I meant to look to see what the deadline is, and I think it's later this month. So, it just might be a swing and a miss. We'll see if.
Yeah. So it's, maybe people are waiting for the deadline. We can keep our fingers crossed. But even if we don't get any other submissions, the one that we did get, if we read it and we like it, we can publish it. So.
I would like to see more on that. I really think the pandemic in Redux would be great anecdotes or a good article. How I survived the pandemic. One of our statesman lawyers here in this jurisdiction, he shall remain nameless, although he's being nominated shortly for a DSA, didn't want to retire, but he has basically been forced into retirement because of the pandemic. He told me he only had 2 cases left and he basically gave it up. And I'm sure there are other stories like that, some sad, some humorous, some inspiring. And I'd sure like to see other lawyers write about how they coped with the pandemic, good, bad, and ugly.
Right. Well, I know
we could extend the deadline and give a few more months. Again, this is something that's not going away for probably the next
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
did we publish
and,
it, Jennifer?
I'm sorry?
Where did we publish the, like, let everyone know, put them on notice that we were
In
you
the journal.
okay. I wonder if there's another, I wonder if there's another way to get the word out, because I agree with Gray. There are a lot of angles and stories and perspective
Right.
that, and it's current and timely, that there ought to be a better way to reach out to, our
We can
stakeholders.
always send an email blast. We've been sort of, for a while there, we were sending out so many about COVID and court updates and messages from the Chief Justice and messages from President Willoughby. And so we were kind of like trying to, pull back on some of our e-blasts. But if that's something that like Peter thinks we can go ahead and do, then we can send out an e-blast to the membership about
An
it.
e-blast would be great. And Peter, what about posting it on Facebook and Twitter for us? Can you do that?
Alice has her hand up. I wonder if she's wanted to speak on this.
Yeah, I do. We are being asked to send out a lot of public service announcements right now. The court is asking us to do that. Various other folks are asking to do that. And we have our own sort of public service announcements that we're having to do. So I'm really reluctant to use that platform too much. What we're trying to get the attention of lawyers when we send something from the North Carolina State Bar. So we want them to know it's something that's really requires their attention and hopefully sort of immediate attention. We can definitely put something on the website and do that. Jennifer and Peter and I can give it some more thought about how to publicize that more widely, but I'd really prefer not to use the e-blast for something of this nature.
How do you feel about Facebook or Twitter?
Twitter. I mean, I think that's a great way to do it, Peter.
Yeah, we can do that.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, the governor extended the deadline, so you can extend yours.
Yeah, if you guys would talk about that and let us know, because I do think that there are stories, just like everybody said. I mean, I have my own stories. I don't know if I have the time to write about it, but anybody who's having to deal with mediations and litigation is in a whole new world of practice. And I'm sure that, yeah, there are stories out there. And if we can just figure out a way to get people motivated to write, and it's not worth letting go just yet. So
Jennifer, could you send us the blurb of detail so that maybe we could reach out individually to folks and encourage some submissions that way?
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, that's a good point, Camille. Jennifer, if you send it to us, I mean, maybe you can just cut and paste what you have in the journal. But if you send it to us, then maybe we can send it on, instead of just, in addition to talking, just email that blurb to people in our district, maybe, and just say, hey, this is, something to consider, and so it's not coming from the bar, it's coming from the counselors.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
Is it worthwhile to go so far as to send it to all the counselors and ask them to go ahead and send it to their members, their district members? What do you guys think about that? Nobody has any feeling one way or the other about it?
That might help get the word out more, because people are get a lot of communications, and if they get something from that, it might prompt something.
Okay. So Jennifer, is there any reason we can't do that?
I mean, not on my end.
Okay. So let's go ahead and send it to all of the bar counselors with a request that they forward it to their members, the members in their district, and ask them just to consider writing for the contest. All right. Okay, does anybody else have something they want to share, any ideas or questions, comments before we end? I think we're at the end of our agenda.
I have one topic I'd like to throw out for a possible future article. We're in the midst of and heading toward rougher times in terms of a housing crisis. And it's been abated by some of the actions in Congress, which are set to expire the end of this month. There's a young lawyer here in Greensboro who works for Legal Aid who has cobbled together some arguments from the congressional record and from the governor's order and Chief Justice's order to try and keep people in their houses, and she could put together an article discussing sort of that strategy. And things are going to change. I think over the next month, Congress is going to do something. Who knows? But that's an evolving area that should be of interest to us all.
See what she can come up with, and if she'll agree to write something.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Alice?
Thank you, Peter. So I wanted to plant a little seed with the Publications Committee, and that has to do with the October annual meeting. We have not made any decision about whether that will be in person or not. But one of the big events at the October annual meeting is the 50-year lawyer luncheon. And so we have some special concerns with regard to gathering that particular group of people because of the age of the folks who will be there. And it's a big luncheon, and it would be really unfeasible to have a socially distanced kind of luncheon. It would almost defeat the whole purpose, because so much of that is about these lawyers getting together and seeing their colleagues that they have practiced with for so many years. So one of the things we are going to go ahead and do is write to them, the 50-year lawyers, and ask them to write their bios. You know, we do that every year. We send them a series of questions and ask them to write something. And then we usually put that in a program that we hand out at the 50-year lawyer luncheon. If we are unable to hold the 50-year lawyer luncheon, I think it would be really nice if we could publish all of those bios. We can edit them down and, you know, have a certain number of words per person or whatever. This might be a special supplement issue of the journal because there'll be a lot of them. I don't know how many at this point, but I just wanted to plant that seed as a possibility. I'll talk with Jennifer about the logistics of doing that and the expense of running a separate journal supplement or something of that nature. But that's sort of where I'm going. If we can't have a luncheon, that would be a really nice way to honor these folks, including a photograph and really making it a really special publication.
Yeah, I mean, I think we owe it to them to get something out if they can't come to that luncheon. So I'm supportive of that. So I guess I'm assuming that, Alice, you and Jennifer can work out whether it's financially feasible and whether we can do it, but I don't see any reason not to.
Well, to tell you the truth, if we don't have an in-person annual meeting, we've got a lot of money in the budget that's freed up. So, but I think the more interesting question, or more difficult question, is going to be, is this going to be something that's a part of the journal or it's a supplement to the journal? I think the cost goes up substantially if it's a supplement to the journal, but if it's a part of the journal, that's, you're talking about one long journal. So Jennifer I hadn't mentioned this to Jennifer. Actually, this is something that occurred to me yesterday when I was communicating with the officers about plans for the October meeting. And so I'll pursue this with Jennifer. We may need to act fairly quickly to make it happen. So we'll try to work out the logistics and the expense on that, and keep you all apprised of all of that.
My tendency is to think that adding it to the journal as opposed to having something separate would be maybe better. What do you think, Jennifer? Or do you want to wait and, okay.
Psych.
Okay.
Let her think about it.
Okay. All right.
I just lobbed a bomb in her direction. So.
Yeah. Because my initial thought is that not everybody comes to the meeting anyway. Not everybody reads the bios or gets the program. So then, yeah, I'm not sure then why this year we're sending everybody the program, but we can figure it out.
Okay.
Figure something out.
All right.
I'll be glad to donate the president's page as a self-sacrifice to let them use that space.
Top.
Never. We
Nice
won't let
try.
you off the hook, Colin.
That's your swan song, Colin. You're not allowed to
No.
do that.
It may be just a collection of prayers. Heidi's got those, and I'll use those.
It
Okay,
would
before we go sign off, I have one question. I think I know the answer to, but I want to ask Jennifer, have you seen improvement on how quickly we're getting feedback back to you on these articles? I have felt like it's gotten better, and I hope.
I agree. I think the follow-up, now that we're kind of on a timeline,
Yeah.
and I'm sending you the articles on a certain day, and then the deadline is, a week and a half later, and I can send those reminder emails. I think everyone's really getting back to me very quickly, and it's been great.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, let's end on a good note then. I'm sorry we're not going to see everybody in person. I know everybody's probably feeling the same way, but it's good to see your faces.
Very much.